Things for this week. It's going to be writing L, your discussion post for the week 5 post, and then assignment number 3. So I'll go through each of them. They sort of all have to do with one another. So actually doing them in this order would be the best, so that you can then use what you've already written to complete assignment 3. So this week's all about sources, finding and eventually using a primary source and 2 secondary sources. So here's what this means. You're going to have a choice for the primary source. So here's the deal. You need to get a primary source. You need to use a primary source in the final essay. Okay? So primary sources. These are documents that are like first-hand accounts of things and original documents, in the sense of birth certificates, the Constitution. They can be anything. Interviews, they can be letters. So you're trying to get to there's a original source, an originating source, I guess. Creative artworks, obviously all of those things are primary sources. Speeches. So when we did Martin Luther King, right, his speech, that's a primary source. All speeches are primary sources, that type of thing. So you're going to need to either locate one and use it for the final essay, or you're going to create your own. Okay, so here's what writing L is about. You're going to do one of these things. You're either doing the thing from column 1 or you're doing it from column 2. So column 1 is just the location of a source, and I just put a bunch of the examples here. Like an actual law, right? Like that's a version, that's a type of primary source, right? If you can cite some actual law that was passed in some state or whatever, that's primary source. So you're going to locate one, and then for writing L, you're going to write the APA citation that you found. So you find your primary source, and then you cite it using APA format, right? And you'll eventually put it on your reference page. Then you write a paragraph that summarizes the source. Here's what it's about. Here's what it focuses on. Here's what it uses or what it talks about, whatever. You want to explain how the primary source that you found is going to help you talk about the changing narrative. Because now the literature review is all about talking about the traditional narrative. Now we are focusing on the changing of that narrative and how and when that started and what that means. So you need a primary source that's going to help you do that. So you write a paragraph, you find it, you cite it, you write a paragraph that summarizes it, you explain how it's going to help you discuss the changing narrative, and you explain the connection that it has to the paradigm, meaning does it talk about plot, does it talk about character, does it talk about setting or values or themes, right? Because it's going to be focused on one of these elements. Everything is. From our point of view, viewing these narratives and everything, everything, can be discussed and talked about in these terms. So that's your first choice. Find one and use it. A case study also works. If somebody did a case study about something, that's another thing. Okay, if you don't want to do that or you want to do something else, you can make your own primary source. So what this means, this is going to involve this. You're going to create a 10-question survey, and you're going to create a 10-question interview. So the 10-question survey are questions that you would presumably send out to social media world, post them all over the place, whatever, just so you could gather data. And the data is going to help you talk about your changing narrative. The 10-question interview are 10 questions that you would ask in an interview with somebody to find out information that would help you talk about your changing narrative. So you're going to create both of these, but then you only have to do one. So you actually have to do one of them. So you do your survey, you do your interview questions, and then you think, all right, which one is going to be the best or get me the best information, and you do that one. So you either send your survey out into the world and collect data, or you email the questions to somebody who you know who will answer the interview questions. So You do the 10 questions for the survey, you do the 10 questions for the interview, but then you pick only one of them, and that's what you actually do that one. Then for whichever one you actually do, right, you create the citation for it. So we can find out how to do that, like how you cite, original things that you've done. And then you basically do the similar thing. You're just going to say, here are the results from the survey or the interview. So either you have a bunch of data from the survey or you have answers from the interview. So you go, here they are. And then you just explain in your own words how it's going to help you talk about your changing narrative and how it connects to some element of the narrative paradigm, plot, character, setting, values, or themes. So that's the first thing you're deciding. You're either locating a primary source or you're creating a primary source. I'm going to ask people in a minute, or maybe in a little bit. I'm actually just curious to know what people are thinking. You might not know yet, but I would be interested to see which way you're leaning, which one you think you're more interested in actually doing. Because again, it depends on your sort of strengths, right? If you're pretty comfortable researching, maybe finding a primary source is not that big a deal for you, so you would want to do that because it's easier. If that's a pain and you don't like it, and you can generate material pretty easily, maybe generating 10 survey questions and 10 interview questions, and then launching one is an easier thing. So that's obviously your choice, but I'd be curious because I want to help people to do it, so I'd like to know what they're deciding to do. So that's this week. So my suggestion is the first thing to do is decide on which of the primary sources you're going to pursue. So will you try to find a source? Maybe you already have a source. That would be something, right? A primary source. Or are you going to make one? And so in the chat place, I'll ask the question. And if before you're done today, if you want to just type in what you're thinking, that will help me. I will show you this. So this is my writing L. And I'm starting to try to just give an example of like how you would start to create questions, right? So there's these elements here. So you basically just explain in a few words the changing narrative that you're going to focus on. Identify, if you can, one of the main change agents or elements, and then you're trying to create questions that will help you gather and explain how or why the change began, or what the consequences of the change have been. So you want to have some sort of focus for the questions, right? So that they will give you actual information. So here's me answering it. The changing narrative I'm focusing on is how the function, purpose, and perceptions of higher education has changed in America. One of the main change elements is technological advances, widespread use of the internet, and the behaviors these have caused. So my survey questions, just some ideas. I need to compare the older generation's experience of college with today's experience and look at how technology and the internet have changed the way people learn and changed the value of college. All right, and so then I just got started. I just started this with the last class. So when was the last time you were involved in formal higher education, such as community college, four-year college, or some form of graduate school? Here are my answers. This is how I'm going to figure out where people are, right, as far as how close they are to it the last time they went to some sort of college. Establish who they are, and then I can start to ask them about the experience and find out information about how technology affected their experience. And then if you're doing the interview questions, you can probably, transform a lot of your survey questions into interview questions, right, that one person would answer.